Coming to you from UBN Studios in Burbank, California. You are listening to the Unsugar-Coated Podcast with your host, Ollie Alanius.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode. Actually, this is our season finale for this particular season, and it's been hopefully a good season for you so far. I am actually going to open today with some words. This is going to be a little different. I'm going to open with some words that I actually wrote on April 12th, and it's called oxygen. Oxygen. Suddenly, you seem so important to me. The thought of not having you takes my breath away. Pink in my skin, life in my bones, suddenly oxygen. You're so important to me. My chest feels tight. I can't get right. Climbing a mountain, never quite reaching the top. I'm begging you to ease my pain. Fill my lungs again, allowing me to breathe again. That sweet thing called life, thanks to oxygen. Okay. So I know I've never really done something like that on the show, but ironically enough, when I wrote that, I was actually referring to this overwhelming feeling and sense of anxiety that a lot of us are feeling in the world right now. And, you know, a couple of episodes ago, I spoke about resilience and how as a character trait, resilience is a person's mental ability, to recover quickly from misfortune, illness, or depression. Today, I've invited someone to talk more on the topic, especially with regards to survivorship of trauma. Now, those of you who have been paying attention, my big focus is on survivors of trauma. What does that mean? It kind of seems pretty broad, and I know people are like, what, who does that really mean? But I'm like, in a way, it means everybody. Because the reality is so much more of us have experienced trauma than we realize. And in turn, it drives our behaviors. And in the cases where people have learned to be stronger and more emotionally intelligent and equipped to face the continued challenges that life throws our way, that is great. But unfortunately, the reality is so many haven't. And that's who I want to talk to. So many are actually walking around right now operating in a post-traumatic stress disorder, and I'm big on trying to address that. So, in addition to remaining positive and focused on how we can help others, and I'm referring to others like myself who have managed to turn their previous trauma into experience and purpose, we come here to share our stories, and it's out of service to you. So just keep that in mind because we all want to help others be better. And so with that, I'll stop saying so. I know I keep doing that. Somebody smack me every time I say so. But I'm really excited because this man today, he is definitely a person with a huge heart, a commitment to the community, and I'm excited to bring him on. So let's go. Michael Anthony is the author of the best-selling book, Think Unbroken, and is a coach, mentor, and educator for adult survivors of child abuse. Michael spends his time helping other survivors get out of the vortex to become the hero of their very own story and take back their lives. Host of the Michael Unbroken podcast, which teaches at Think Unbroken Academy and is on a mission to create change in the world. Everybody, please welcome Michael Unbroken. Hello. How are you?
Hello, I'm amazing, my friend. What is up? I'm so stoked to be here right now.
Thank you. Well, tell our audience for the listening, you're not in studio. Where are you talking to us today from?
Yeah, I'm in Portland, Oregon right now. I am in my living room talking to you. The power of 2020.
Yes, and thank you for taking the time because I know you're also in the middle of a move. So I thank you for being able to jump on and share this with us. So I really shared a short bio on you, and I want, if you can, please share with our audience in a way that you feel comfortable, of course, what your experience has been with trauma that's made it so important for you to go and help other survivors of trauma.
Yeah, high level as it was, it feels like my calling. One day I just woke up and I was like, oh, this is what I'm supposed to do with my life. I come from a place where statistically I should not be talking to you right now. I should be dead or in jail. And I was well on my way down that path. And it took a lot of effort and hard lessons learned to put me in a position where I ultimately became the hero of my own story. Fast forward quite a few years later, and here I am.
Yeah. if you can, I mean, and I know I never want to make someone feel like, because this is something that's sensitive in media. I feel when you talk to someone who's been through certain traumas, certain tragedies, you want to give the audience and people an idea, but I'm not personally ever trying to exploit anyone on their pain and their suffering, but you've actually been through some really traumatic things. And I know you've shared some of those. When you talk about a challenge and you say you should have been, one way or the other, what are some of the things that make you say that?
Yeah, totally. Why don't I do this? I'll lay out the high level overview and then we can go from there.
Sounds good.
My life story is so chaotic, it would literally take all day to tell. So I grew up in Indiana, a part of the Mormon church. My mother was a drug addict and alcoholic. She actually cut off my right index finger when I was only 4 years old. So that kind of starts to lay the foundation. She married the most abusive man you could ever imagine, like the stepfather you pray that you don't get. And by the time that I was like 11 years old, we were homeless. I was living in and out of probably 30 to 40 different people's homes. One of my brothers was given up. There's a lot of turmoil and chaos in the home. And by the time I'm 12, my grandmother adopts me. And so I'm biracial. This is super important, both black and white. My grandmother's an old, super racist white lady from this little town in Tennessee that you've never heard of. So now insert identity crisis on top of finding drugs and alcohol at 12 years old and pretty much drinking and smoking my teens away. But I didn't graduate high school on time. I was running with gangs, using drugs, stealing cars, breaking into houses, doing a lot of really bad things. But at the time it was surviving. And it was community because I found connection with people who in my neighborhood, we all had the same experiences. Yeah. And by the time that I was in my 20s, I was consumed with workaholism. I was morbidly obese, smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day, just really not anywhere in line with values of what I now consider to be my mission and goal in life. And I had this really pivotal moment where I recognized that I was leveraging and using my trauma as an excuse to not show up for myself. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, it was in this moment where I literally had to look in the mirror and ask myself, like, why are you not showing up and being the person that you promised yourself as a child you would be? And that was about 8, almost 9 years ago. And since, I've been on a mission to utilize and share my story. And there are some very, very dark parts of it. Again, it would take too long to dive into right now, but I have leveraged that experience and the authenticity of who I am to show other people that there is still potential. Absolutely. No matter what, no matter where you're from, no matter how bad your trauma was, I believe firmly as a person with an ACE score of 10, so I am the minority of this, that there is always potential for what's next. And that's where Think Unbroken came from. I believe we live in this odd society that labels people who are different or have mental health issues or come from poverty as broken. And I don't believe that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I totally agree. I remember being in the Van Gogh Museum, and one of my favorite parts of seeing his work was that there was a vase he did, and it has 3 flowers in it, and one of them is off. It's broken. And I remember thinking, if he meant to imply that just because it was broken, it didn't take away from its beauty. It didn't change the fact that this was still a beautiful flower and that it still was in the vase. Like, instead, because most people say, why would you put a broken flower in your painting? Like, why would you not put perfect, pristine? And I actually felt that given his background and stuff, there was just something deeper I saw about it. And I agree with you, the way that we think about that. I love that you said that you became the hero of your story. I relate. People who know me on my podcast, every time you talk, I just smile because I'm like, kindred spirits, I get it. And don't you feel proud of the moment that you became so empowered that all those judgments from what other people try to put on you fell away and fell off? Or did they? Or what was that? Did you have that moment? And if you did, what did it feel like?
It's really funny. There's a little bit of irony in here because I always had this sense of having a chip on my shoulder. Ever since I was a child, I wanted to prove people wrong because I just knew that whatever they were telling me was bullshit. I knew that the direction of my life was not up to them.
Right.
But yet I lived that life for so long because what I hadn't recognized is if it's true that we are the sum total of all of our experiences, then all the abuse, all of the negative self-talk, all of the people telling me I can't, I won't, I shouldn't, don't, I'm not good enough, I'm not ever going to make it. All of those things, all that narrative led to this place where I just fought, right? But I wasn't fighting the right battle. right? It's like being on the wrong side of the field and looking at it and going, why am I fighting for things that don't matter?
Right.
And it was with that chip on my shoulder that I really leveraged it against myself to say, all right, it's time to show up the right way.
Right. Yeah, it transitions for sure. I know what you mean. Well, okay, going back, and one of the things that I want to use you for, because, you know, and I have to back this up with saying, when I was younger and kind of coming up in my early 20s, I did books and I would read, but I can't lie, whenever I heard the word motivational speaker or coach, or, well, coach is more prevalent now, but anything that was somebody who got up and advised people on how to live their life or live a better quality of life, I used to kind of laugh, right? I was that person who was like, ha ha ha, I don't need somebody telling me common sense. Like you just said, I know if I get up and do something, life will be better for me. I know if I did, but like you said, I wasn't doing it. So it's interesting how when I really got into personal development is when I'm like, okay, well now I'm knowing it. Now I'm learning how to actually put it into action, right? So that was something that I really opened up to. And resilience training, I think that you clearly are a resilient person. And I think that when we look at resiliency within people like ourselves who have actually, and like you, yeah, we could both sit here all day long. And I kind of love it. I don't mean that in a competitive way of like who's suffered more, but I mean, I get you. I know you've had pain. And I think that we get to celebrate the fact that we did come through that and we are stronger for it. But when we talk about some of the things that are character traits in that resilient training, one of them I found is silver lining people. How often was it important for you in kind of some of the traumas and the things that you went through? Was it to keep did you have a silver lining mentality, or did you have to kind of assume that as you were going through these things?
You know, I think that's a really fascinating question. What comes to mind immediately is I am a realist by nature. I'm not a pessimist, right? And so I don't ever look for the negative in everything, but I'm also not an optimist.
Right.
I look at it from this perspective. You get in life what you're willing to put into it, right? It's that old adage, you reap what you sow. And as I was in the throes of doing this really intensive work, I was thinking about what is the objective, right? I think that a lot of times in this process and in mental health and in coaching and in personal growth, there is so many misnomers and so many snake oil salesmen, and it's easy to get lost in it. And the most important question that you have to ask yourself is why? As the person stepping into this and doing the hard work and creating change in your life and showing up to therapy and journaling and yoga and meditation and doing all the things, you have to ask yourself why. And I knew in my life, my why was that I promised myself I was not going to live a life predetermined by other people.
Right.
And the only way I was going to be able to work to that goal was to go in and reframe all the experiences that I had and the understanding that of who I was in order to step into life on my terms.
Yes.
And so I don't want to sit and say like I had this rose-colored silver linings experience in this journey because it was so dark and there was a lot of stuff that I had to go through. But I knew that if I stayed the course, eventually I would reach my goal. And part of that was understanding that it may take a lifetime to get to where I want to go, but I'm willing to do it no matter what because I see what my life could be.
Yes. I agree with you. I mean, that's so well said, so perfectly said. I agree with you. How about, as part of being resilient, also being fine without normal? Like, look, we're all going through COVID. I'm a cancer survivor, 3-time cancer survivor. I live with 2 autoimmune diseases and fibromyalgia. And a lot of times people don't understand that. For me, like this COVID, be careful, don't get sick. I've always had to be careful on airplanes. Before COVID, I've had to wear a face mask on a plane because of treatment and things. So I've been there. But my circumstances taught me to be fine without normal. And that actually forced abandonment of normalcy gives an advantage during an uncertain time. That's what I've found. I don't know about you. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because it's just like even kind of going back to the silver lining, I remember one time running out of gas and pushing the car, and I was in heels, and my sister and I were both pushing the car, and I look at her and I'm like, well, it could be worse. And she's like, how could this be worse? And I'm like, it could be raining. And she just laughed at me. She's like, oh my God, it could be raining. You're right. How could it? But it's like being fine without normal. And I think that we're right now with everyone's mentality of well, I can't go out and do the normal things that I want to. But I'm saying in my perspective and with my experience, and that's why I'm asking yours, I learned to be fine without the normal. And I think that's why when it happens, it's not such a shock. Does that make sense?
I firmly believe that people who have survived really intensive traumatic experiences in their life, whether during childhood or in their adult years, are able to handle chaotic times like right now more efficiently than anyone else, because our brains have become programmed to thrive within the chaos. That's not necessarily a good thing. I'm just saying it is a thing.
Right.
I don't know what normal means. You know what I mean? Because I grew up in the least possible definition of normal that you could possibly imagine. And then I left the place that nobody leaves. I've traveled the world. I've lived in a dozen different countries. I've spoken all the world. I wrote a book when I didn't even graduate high school on time. Like, I mentor and coach people around the world who are athletes and celebrities and everyone in between. Normal to me is showing up every day and just going for it. Like, that's my definition of normal. And like recognizing no matter what, like there's always going to be something. There's like always a roadblock. There's always an object that's going to be in your way. And ultimately, like, I think if you're stuck in this place of normal, like you're not really pushing yourself.
Yeah.
Now, I realize contextually, COVID is not normal, right?
Right.
But even in this time, I'm thinking like, how do I push myself even further? Right, in business and personal development and career and life and partnerships and relationships and self-love and in showing up for myself. And I'll tell you right now, I've pushed myself further in 2020 than I have any other time in my life. I'm having the best year of my life and simultaneously the most trying and difficult year of my life as well, because I'm stepping through to determine what my normal looks like.
I agree. I mean, I wonder how many more of our audience, I feel the same way. I know some people, I've talked about that at different episodes. I get it. And I've been honest. And like I said, there are moments where I'm like, this is really testing me. But yeah, I
get tested too. I have these moments.
Too. And I'm like,
Everyone
looking
does.
Forward to 2021. And not just because it's not 2020. I'm actually, because like you said, like, yeah, for those of us, and that goes back to that resilience, like it just is, I don't know. I mean, whenever I've had an opportunity, Michael, I don't know about you, when people are like, oh, I don't know if you can really do that. And it's like, oh, all right, well, let me try. Watch me try. And if I do it, then, it's like, I've never really been the type to wait around for other people to give me permission to do things, in the sense, once I grabbed hold of that. Which leads me to another thing. And I say this because we are talking about just, different people and their experiences. Permission to turn off the brain and say no, which ultimately that's to keep you from burning out in your day-to-day life and managing all that you do, as a human being, and advice that you give to others. What do you say about that part of just the journey, saying no and saying, this is off time, this is Michael time? Like, what is it? What are your thoughts on that part of living life?
Yeah, it's a necessity. Like, to me, I think about it like, what are your rules of life? Have you laid down a foundation and rules set in your life that says this is where and how I operate? And I have very strict rules in my life. For one, I don't work on Sunday ever, bar an emergency, because Monday through Saturday, I'm going for it, right? And I'll share this with you. I don't actually get burned out, because when that time comes that my brain and my body say, dude, you have got to take a break. You've been going nonstop for 8 days or 14 hours or whatever it is. I stop and take a break.
Right.
Because why am I going to destroy myself for something that, like, right now in that moment, outside of a dire emergency, probably can wait an hour or a night of rest, right?
Yeah.
We, as an entrepreneur, we live in this very, very strange time where it's like sleep can wait till you're dead, where I'm like, I sleep literally a regimented 8 hours every night, no questions asked.
Right.
And I get up at 5:30 a.m. every day and I go for it, right? Because that is a rule of my life. And so people who question this idea of like, and I get this a lot, because my life motto is literally no excuses, just results. Because what that means to me is like, how do you always show up for yourself no matter what, in a time where, as well as I do, where we've made excuses for everything, right? And even not showing up for yourself in these times of rest, Why? Why are you making this excuse? Why are you not giving yourself what you need? And of course, there's a trauma response in there, and there's mindset, and then it's a very deep rabbit hole. But as a whole, I always have to come back and ask the question, why?
Right, right. It's funny. I'm glad that you say that, because I think a lot of people are challenged with the idea of giving themselves permission to take a break. And especially with an entrepreneur, like I've been an entrepreneur most of my business life. And so I've owned businesses and companies and had employees. Sometimes I have companies without. My husband, he just started doing, and I have to tell you this story. He started doing, he calls it retirement. Sorry, honey, I'm spilling the beans on this one. But he's been doing retirement Fridays with one of our friends, one of my friend's husband. And he's from France. So he's got like, culture as far as like Fridays after 40 is retirement Fridays. And so they go play golf. And the other day I was having some coffee with my husband, and I was like, wow, so do you guys like play golf and just sit there and look at your phones? Because I know you never stop working. Like you're always checking emails, you're always, and he goes, oh, no, we're really good. It's like no phones. And I was like, wait. I was a little bit jealous. I'm like, so wait, so you have no phones with Julian? But I actually was proud of him regardless. I'm teasing him, but I was proud of him because I know that for him as a business person, he goes. And it's like, I have to take this call. And so many times I'm like, you really don't. I know you think you do, but I'm going to not give you a hard time. But I'm proud of him for giving himself permission to even take that Friday, even if it's for only 5 weeks or whatever they're doing it for. I think it's healthy. Right? Like, and it keeps you kind of going. And I think, like you said, you then don't get burnout. Like, I don't actually get burnout. There's times where my body just is like, yeah, like you said, yo, you got to stop. And I do. I take that break because I recognize I'm good to nobody if I don't have me operating, right? Which speaks to the second part, which you kind of already, or another part of that is where I feel is very critical in my own life. I make the most of every moment that I can. When you talk about survivors of trauma and how we look at things, like, I don't know what it is where when I'm walking with my daughter somewhere, it's not just a walk. I'm spending time with her. I'm nurturing her. I'm giving her hopefully a memory that she can look back on when she gets older. And I get a little emotional when I talk about that. It might be the 4 kids. But I mean, I really have learned to just enjoy every moment, no matter how insignificant it can be or the big one. Like, how about you?
Yeah, I think one of the most impactful, and I actually love retirement Fridays. I love that idea. But to me, I think about the roles of my life, right? And so when I check out and I'm not working, I'm present, right? My phone has no notifications on it. If you call me, I have no idea that you just called me. I don't know. Wow. There's no way for me to know, because here's the thing that you have to come back to is like, what is your intention? I always think about this in everything that I do in my life, from how I'm showing up to have this conversation with you to what I'm doing after. Like, how am I going to show up right now? What is my intention? And I am always moving towards this concept or notion or idea of being present while recognizing, like, this is my life. Right now, this moment, right here with you, this is my life. Not tomorrow, not next week, not the thing I got to do after this thing, but right now, this is my life. So how do I be present by it? I'm here with you. I'm undistracted. Nothing else matters except what I'm delivering and giving to you right now and what I am consuming from you in this moment. And I include that from watching a movie to like taking a walk to being at the gym. Like, I exist in that moment because it's so easy to get distracted. Yes. And I come from a background of being very, very, very dissociated, where my brain and my body were so far away that it took a decade of work and my life savings to get them back in line. Because like they didn't know how to work together. Right. And so now I cherish those moments. If I can be here with you right now, I'm like, this is my fucking life and I'm in it.
And we love it. I'm so glad you said that, because it caused me to think about something I've often shared with people. As a cancer survivor, I've unfortunately come to moments where someone's coming to the end, maybe they're in the hospital and everyone starts praying. I don't know if, and I'm not bagging on this. This is not like a negative. I'm not saying don't do this, but I've found, or I've noticed over the years, like the first year that I battled cancer, 7 of my friends within my cancer circle died. Most of them were younger than me. And it was a very consistent thing that towards the end, as they got to the worst part, everyone, we're praying for a miracle. We're praying for a miracle. Please pray that she pulls through. Please pray. And, didn't take just them. And I've had several friends. One of my best friends died last year. And even then I had to remind everyone, she spent 14 years battling cancer, or excuse me, 16 years battling cancer. That was the miracle, that she was still here for 16 years. You know, I had people who would like, at the end, we're praying for the miracle. And I'm like, the miracle has been here every day that I got to pick up the phone and call her and say hi and say, how are you doing? I love you. Can you and the kids come down, or can I come see you and the kids? Every time I got to do that, that was the miracle. And so, I know exactly what you mean by that. And I think it's incredibly powerful that you said it, because I feel that also as a part of resilience, it has a lot to do with making peace with your past, with the past. And it seems like you've done a lot of that. Talk about that journey with us if you can, because to hear that you went through so much, and I think people are very fascinated with how we are able to do that.
Yeah, I used to hate myself really intensely because I felt like I deserved all the bad things that happened to me, right? That's embedded in us. That is taught to us. That is given to us and bestowed upon us from, unfortunately, the adults who are supposed to take care of us, and they don't, and they break us down. And I recognize, like, generational trauma begets generational trauma. And, it is with that understanding that I was able to start to form a narrative in which I reframe my understanding of self. Forgiveness is such a buzzword, and I'm sorry, but it is, when it comes to everything in mental health and personal growth right now. And ultimately, I think that forgiveness is something that you have to decide for yourself, whether or not A, you're going to give it to yourself, or B, give it to other people. And for me, I found that it wasn't always necessarily forgiveness that pushed me through into what was next. It was me acknowledging and taking ownership over the experiences that I had had. And look, let me be clear, like, I had some crazy, insane experiences. A lot of them were super fun, but they were very detrimental to my lifestyle, right? They were killing me. They were hurting other people, right? Whatever that may be. And that's a weird juxtaposition, right? But my point being is, I had to acknowledge, like, I've made mistakes.
Right.
And so I can go and do the things that I need to do to create change in my life, or I can just go, I forgive me for that thing that I did yesterday. It's kind of like that old adage where, there is no atheist in foxholes, meaning that up until that moment, everyone will sin, and then they're about to die and they go, please forgive me, right? And absolving them of all the things that they've done. But I recognize that if I would just give myself forgiveness, then I would just be able to do it again and again and again. And it didn't change the behavior. Right. The behavior only changed through the course of action, right? Suffering ends in action, right? And I've been thinking about that again and again and again. And one of the really pivotal moments for me, and this is kind of interesting because I always reflect back on it. I was watching this documentary about the Foo Fighters, and Dave Grohl, the lead singer guitarist of the Foo Fighters, said, I'm happy about the happy things and I'm sad about the sad things. And that was really this incredibly pivotal moment for me where I go, that is a beautiful way to think about life, because we can't change the past. We can't do anything about even what happened 5 seconds ago. It's here in history forever. But what can I do? I can change my life moving forward. And ultimately, do I need to forgive myself? Perhaps, but it's contextual, right? Do I need to forgive other people? Same. Look, my mother was an awful person. She cut my finger off. She was super abusive. She was narcissistic, an alcoholic and drug addict. She left me and my brothers literally homeless as children in our home for weeks at a time by ourselves. I would have to steal food. I would have to only shower at school. Like, we were so poor, like our electricity would get cut off, like everything. And does she get my forgiveness? No, but I understand why she did those things, right? I'm able to assess and look at, okay, generational trauma impacted her. And we all come to the place where we have to make a choice and decision in our lives about how we move forward. And you know what? Here's the thing. You always hear people say you have to forgive in order to heal. I don't believe that's true. I think what you have to do is acknowledge that bad things have happened to you, accept it, not in that you deserved it, but in that it was a reality, and then move forward.
Right.
Because ultimately, I could linger and hold on to this idea that my mother was terrible forever. Right. And for a long time, I did. And when I look at where that got me, and not even her alone, but people in my life, And I look at the way that I leveraged that experience and those experiences, and it destroyed me.
Right.
And ultimately, it was when I looked at myself and I said, you know what? You have to come to the acceptance of the truth that bad things happen to you. And
Right.
because of that, that's going to empower you to move on, because you can stop pretending that it didn't.
Right, right. And closure, when you give that your closure to yourself, it becomes irrelevant of another person, which I like that. I was so thankful when I came to that moment in my life where I was able to say, okay, you should be saying sorry to me, but you're not. But you know what, though? That's okay. Because like you said, like I give myself closure. I know a lot of people in relationships. And honestly, you said exactly, funny enough, because, the next step in that is exactly understanding that life is not always fair. I tell my kids all the time, I love them to death, and I try not to sound like a broken record. And I'm not trying to be, I'm like you, the realist. Like, I'm like, kids, look, there's going to be great things about life, and there's going to be really horrible things about life. Even myself, I've talked about when people high five me, oh, you beat cancer, awesome. I'm like, I'm still alive though. It could still come back. I could get hit by a car, something, COVID, who knows? Like, I don't take for granted. Because I'm aware that I'm still, hopefully, God willing, going to live a longer life. And in that life, there's probably going to be ups and downs. And I don't know what you think on this. I think one of the challenges people, struggle. And when you're a child, you have less control over the things that happen to you. But then when you do become an adult and you are hopefully, well, at least a mature adult where you're really truly in control of things a little bit more, at least as control as we can be, it is important to, like, there's people I see, and there's the problems in their life are like the roller coaster. I always say that life is like a wave. Yes, there's going to be storms, and yes, there's going to be rocking in the boat. But if you're on the roller coaster and you're going up and down, and you don't know which way is up and you don't know which way is down, that's toxic. That's not healthy. Get away from that, So leading into what you said, like, life is not always fair. How do people respond when you say that? When you're saying to them, like, I mean, I know I get it. I tell that to my daughter, and she's like, you're being so unsympathetic. And I'm like, no, I'm just trying to be honest with you. But with your, group, you work with a lot of people. When you say to them, or you say something along the lines of life isn't fair, what is usually the response?
Yeah. I mean, here's what I think about quite often. Do you really get to complain? Like, when you really look at, and look, comparison steals everything from us, right? And so I want to be very clear about that, but I have to think about measurement in consideration of where my life was versus where my life is. Do I really have justification to complain? Life is not fair. Everything I've worked for my entire life up to this moment could be stripped away from me right now. And you know what I would do? I would keep going. I would start over. I would keep moving forward. And, I try not to necessarily step into this concept of life isn't fair with my clients,
Sure.
instead, or people I work with, but instead I say, okay, what's in front of you right now that is keeping you from achieving the thing that you want in life? And then how do we roadmap and game plan to step towards that, with the understanding that even though we do all that work, we still may not accomplish the goal.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we pivot in that? How do we find another direction? How do we find another door into what it is that we want to do with our lives? How do we step into ultimately that power while understanding the entire time that life isn't fair?
Sure.
Life, it's not. If it were fair, then everyone would be a millionaire. We'd all be living on beaches. I'd be drinking Mai Tais all day. It'd be awesome, right? But, like, realistically, I have to look at what we come from,
Right.
our experiences together in life. And, and the same person that's born with, $1 million trust and the same person that is born with nothing lead two very different lives. And
Right.
fairness is about, to me, I think the idea of fairness to me is about satiation.
Right.
Like, how do you feel about your life? How do you feel about the person that you are? Are you showing up for yourself? Are you, whatever your definition of happy is, right? Comparison is hurting us in such a detrimental way. Like, all we do all day is we look at our phone and Instagram and we scroll and we go, I wish my life would be like this, right? And people put in an hour of work and they expect results where, realistically, if you want anything great in life, it's going to take an insanely long time to get there. Exactly. And like, ultimately, if you're putting life on this pedestal of unfairness, I think you have to really measure, are you giving it a full effort? By all means, and look, I'm not trying to be preachy on a pulpit here, but what I'm saying is you do have power. You have an immense amount of power to create the life that you want to have if you're willing to step into it.
Yeah. And it's not always linear, because that's the thing. I work with a lot of, I've worked with people who have an assumption if something doesn't work out, because you can work very hard at a business, you can do everything that you think you're doing right, and it can still not work out the way you wanted it to. It does not mean that you're a failure. It does not mean that you shouldn't continue on. It can't mean that you're not going to be still successful in the exact same industry, but just like you said, pivoting. What are the lessons I'm learning? What can I do better here? But just that concept of like, well, if I didn't get what I wanted, then life isn't fair. It's like you said, like when my kids are like, whenever they say to me, I want something, I'm like, well, I want the winning numbers to the lotto ticket, kids. I'm not getting that anytime soon. So give me the I want. But how about we do? And, and also like being part of the solution and not the problem for yourself. I find, like you said, a lot of people will complain and they'll look at what they have and what I don't. What are you doing to make those changes? Like you said. And another thing about, as far as resilience training to people, if you have it, you know it, and if you don't, you should. But I mean, to me, and like you said, and I feel this is where survivors of trauma like ourselves come in such handy. I mean, they've said Gen Zers, which I am, and a survivor of trauma, I am, raising my hand, and we have such the ability to, like you said earlier, kind of take control. We're solid during moments of crisis. I don't know why. Like, little things can kind of mess with me than like something serious. Something serious happens and all of a sudden I'm in control. I'm aware of what's happening. I'm aware of what I'm going to do. You know what I mean? It's just and I find in those times I'm also pushing usually my emotions aside to just find the bearings, find how we get, like, if I always give the example, proactive versus reactive thinking. If I fall into a well, okay, I might sit at the bottom of the well and cry a little bit that I freaking ended up in the damn well, but after a second I'm going to dust myself off and figure out how to get the hell out of here. I'm not going to just sit here and cry, right? I'm going to be that's reactive. Versus proactive thinking is that person who's going to get out of the well. How has being able to take control in moments of crisis and you having an understanding of that in your own life, and then now helping others find it, how's that like? And how do you help them maintain that mindset, that stable mindset? I know control is a funny word for me. Maybe for you it is, for me, except like we never really fully, but at the same token, as a leader, you can take a certain amount of control. And I find in my own life, I'm a leader. I'm like a leader. You're a leader. Yeah. I know you're a leader.
Yeah, I mean, like, literally the first thing that popped in my mind as you're saying that was leadership. I think about my core values in life, and leadership is at the top, right? It's honesty, leadership, kindness, self-actualization. That's the way that I live my life. And leadership is not necessarily always a sense of control, but how do I create and frame a game plan? How do I step into helping map something, right? Because to me, I often recognize that this idea of control can be very detrimental, right? Mm-hmm. Perfectionism is a big thing. But to kind of step back to a different point, you talk about the impact that trauma has on us being able to navigate these scenarios in such profound ways. When you think about the sympathetic nervous system and ultimately being this response for survival, shutting down all unnecessary system functions to only survive, in moments of terror or trauma, that is something that kind of gets embedded in us. Mm-hmm. And our body naturally reacts to this. Our brain reacts to it. And when we're in these moments, it's like we just know what to do. Mm-hmm. I think about it like a martial arts person, right? If you fight and you train for years, it becomes a reaction, right? You immediately step into this place where you're like, I know how to navigate this scenario. But from a proactive standpoint, like, you've seen this, right? I don't know about you, but I have such an incredible gift of being able to read people, because as a child, I had to do that, because if I didn't, I would not be safe. I had to step in a scenario, assess the room, assess a person, and ask myself, am I in an environment which is going to be safe and protected? And if not, that sympathetic nervous system would kick in and I would be in fight or flight mode immediately, thinking about, okay, where's the exit? How do I protect myself? How do I get out of here? And that kind of carries over into my adult life. But now those same scenarios have been flipped into, conversations with clients and business agreements and conversations with people like you, where I'm like, okay, how do I step into having not necessarily control, but creating a map and a guide point into solving problems, right? I think the biggest thing that trauma survivors are capable of doing is being incredible problem solvers, right? You put something in front of me and I will find a solution for you.
Yeah. And because I think one of the most key and probably one of the most significant, we plan to survive. We plan to get through it. We plan, even if we don't know. I don't know how to explain that there has not been, as of recent, and I mean, having been at moments in my life, I'm sure like yours, where I didn't know if there was a light at the end of the tunnel, I've learned now to say, even in the darkest night, I know at some point light will come, like even with COVID. And that's kind of why I'm doing this is, I really want to remind people, like, trauma, like as you said, and we talk about that, the sum equals all parts of if I look back on my life, and I of course I hate some of the things I went through. I hate that I had to go through those. But, at the end of, or in my current life, it is just that simple understanding now that it sharpened me. It created this person that I am today. And I'm thankful for that. And now when I see something coming, I'm like, it's all right. We got, it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be tough. It's going to be hard, but it's not going to be impossible. And I feel that people should understand trauma can give you the benefit of that, and it's like, to again rolling right back into the silver lining. How do we see the good with the bad? Because you can't have it. I don't know, but I'm sure as a trauma learner we've learned the yin and the yang. You cannot have the bad without the good. That's a very moment I remember distinctly learning, and I can say that I've planned through all of it to survive. When I was sitting in a hospital bed at 99 pounds, wondering, making a video to my kids to say goodbye, worried that they were going to grow up without hearing the sound of my voice. After I got done feeling sorry for myself, I freaking planned to survive in spite of everything. And when you talk and when you're seeing what people are going through right now, we look at society and we look at a lot of increase in addiction. People are struggling with addiction, suicide, unemployment. Definitely the core of trauma is not knowing what your life is going to be like. If you're in threat, if you are in danger, if you're in harm, you don't know what your future is going to look like. So many people feel that they don't know what their options are. Where does that training, sorry, I know I'm getting a little bit tongue tied here, but where do we send them? Where do we tell them to go when they feel like they have nowhere to go?
Yeah. I think first off, there's a ton of resources available to anyone with a internet connection. It's called Google. Like, realistically, go there, find something. There are shelters, there are homes, there are hotlines, there are services, there are everything you can imagine available right there. The thing that you have to ask yourself is, are you willing to get help? Are you willing to do this thing that you have to do for yourself? And look, I recognize this as someone who is a suicide attempt survivor, that that is easier said than done, because suicide is such this really intense moment in which you I'm going to do this. It is a snap judgment decision. Mm-hmm. It is something that is not generally thought out. Right? It is, oh my God, my life is so fucking terrible, I'm going to end it. Mm-hmm. And that was my experience. But I look at it now and I go, was it really? Or was I just not pointed in any direction? And I recognize, and I've had friends who have been murdered. I have friends who've committed suicide. I have friends who will never step into their power. The same with my family. And I think about my experience with addiction, my experience with depression and anxiety and all those things. Nothing about my life is different then than it is now, except for the fact that A, I stopped getting wasted every day, because that's a huge waste of time. And B, I decided that I'm going to make my life about something. Right. And it wasn't always Think Unbroken. I started this healing journey a decade ago, right? Mm-hmm. Think Unbroken only started coming within the last couple of years out of just, serendipity, for lack of a better term. Right. And in that time frame between I'm going to start this journey to now I do this thing, there was a lot of work in just defining what was the life that I wanted to live. Right. And moving towards that. I think one of the things that people miss is writing down these goals that are so incredibly big that it forces them to move forward. Because I think about this, if my life is like it is right now in 20 years, I have failed really intensely. because I am always thinking about how do I get better? How do I get better as a person? How do I get better as a friend, as a brother, as a partner, as a business owner, as a whatever, right? And every single day I move a little bit more towards that goal. How do I get a little bit better than I was yesterday? I think what my experience was, and this is only speaking for me, being in that place of this intense depression, anxiety, and suicidal ideations and attempts and all of those things, was I wasn't driven by anything. Nothing felt real to me because I was afraid to step into this idea that there was something on the other side, right? I was so afraid of this idea, like realistically, my potential could actually mean something.
Right.
Holy shit, that is so terrifying for someone who grows up and their own parents tell them you're never gonna be shit.
Right.
And their community tells them and their teachers tell them. And then you start to have really what happens is you start to create your own narrative based on that. And ultimately, when you flip the script and you go, okay, I need to sit down, get in touch with me, have some really uncomfortable conversations with myself, and then create a game plan, life's going to be different.
Right. Right. Let's talk about Think Unbroken Academy really quick. And I really want people to understand, like you have your podcast, and I love supporting other podcasters, and thank you so much, because I feel like we're all doing, our own bit of good. Talk about your book, and also, for people interested in knowing more about that, what does that entail, and how can people get involved?
Yeah. So I started the book. I wrote Think Unbroken as a blog post initially. I sat down, and then 5 hours later, I was like, this isn't going to work. Because my goal with Think Unbroken was to create the thing that didn't exist. I've read all the self-help books, went to all the seminars, did all the things, and it still kind of felt like something was missing in the literature. And so I said, how do I create a book that is about the framework of creating a mindset shift and giving people practical tools in an intrinsic way that allows them to step into a further and better understanding of who they are by acknowledging some really hard questions about themselves.
Right.
And ultimately, that's what the book Think Unbroken is. So it is broken down into part self-help book, but practical workbook, where I wrote this book so you actually have to write in it. You have to actually create and formulate answers to questions that I pulled from the Think Unbroken curriculum, which is a workshop that I teach. And so that's where that book came from. It was just kind of this thing where it's like, this feels necessary. And then Think Unbroken Academy is an online training course, about different mindset practices, different practical things. I just released a brand new one called The 5 Keys of Understanding and Overcoming Childhood Trauma. As a baseline, how do you step into creating a reframing of your experiences while also creating the framework of what's next in life? And the biggest thing for me is I felt like as I go, because I'm always learning, right? People always ask me, when do you stop healing trauma? And I'm like, never, because there's never going to be a day where I don't have to show up for myself. And so I love the effort of all of my peers in this space, this very teeny tiny space of people who are willing to step into this, because trauma is for sure the elephant in the room of mental health care in Western culture. And so there are a lot of people who I believe are doing really amazing, beautiful work, and I'm just happy to be one of them. And then the podcast is called Michael Unbroken Podcast. I'm like at 50 episodes or something like that. I decided to put real effort into it because I found out that people really love to listen to it. For a long time, it took the back burner because I was writing the book and creating online courses and, Instagram and all that stuff. But I've really come to fall in love with podcasting.
Oh, I love that. I mean, I get what you mean. I get what you mean. I'm like you. I do it in seasons and stuff. But, I really appreciate that. And I appreciate you being able to come on and share with us, because I know you were traveling and you've been doing so many things. Some of them we didn't even get to talk about. So we might have to have you come in again one day next season. But, to give us an update, because I know you're going to continue to do incredible and wonderful things in this space. I'm with you. I lock arms with you in it, and I think like you, I mean, if you wanted to tell, look, if there is a survivor of trauma sitting out there, probably more than likely listening to this, what is your main message to them right now in this moment?
It's really simple. Though trauma may be our foundation, it is not our future.
I love that. Amen to that. I mean, it's very true. It's so true. I love it. I love it. Where can our audience check you out? For the listening audience, they can't see. So where do you want them to support you and go follow you?
Yeah, I'm on all the social media at Michael Unbroken. And then thinkunbrokenacademy.com for the online courses, and thinkunbroken.com for my one-on-one and small group coaching.
Awesome. 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 Well, again, thank you. I've so enjoyed the time with you. I think you're so incredibly inspiring. Thank you for doing what you do. Thank you for being a voice. And like me, I love it because it's like we get to show the world, man, don't be underestimating us. Don't do it. You'll miss out on so much. So keep going. I applaud you and I look forward. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
Thank you, my friend. It's my pleasure. So honored. I cannot wait to do it again.
Thank you. And to everyone else, thank you so much for joining us. I know it was heavy, but man, we keep it real. You know how we do. And thank you so much. We'll see you next season. We'll, be once again coming unsugarcoated. But today, thank you for letting us be unsugarcoated. Take care. Bye-bye.
It's so strange, I'm not holding my tongue. Radio making me feel so numb. Stolen beats, they're on repeat. But come on, don't we all wanna be someone? Yeah, it's killing me, but I just wanna be a million.
What are you still doing here? Come back next week.